Hi, good evening. I feel it's a privilege to introduce Ashutosh Bhardwaj. Coincidentally, this Sunday, I'm publishing this death script in Kannada. So the book is getting published in Kannada, also I translated and publishing it. It's a mind-blowing book. So what exactly is, three of them, many of them have written about the book. One of them is our own Ramchandra Guha, then Harish Trivedi, Adur Gopal Krishnan, Mrunal Pandey. So all of them have something very common observation in this book. The one is they say it is very honest writing. And second, there is an empathy with the characters. And third one is it's an unbiased account of the Red Corridor. So the book becomes very important because it doesn't stand with any particular ideology or any particular community. So it starts representing what all is happening. There are mainly the three circles there. So one is the Adivasis who live in that jungle, and then the Naxal movement people, those who are into, they would call them Maoists, and then the police. So all these three, how the clash is going on is going to be represented. Interestingly, this entire Red Corridor area was called as Dandakaranya. In mythology, in Ramayana it comes. So it's a Aranya of a Dandaka. So Dandaka was supposed to be a Rakshasa. So it's an Aranya of Dandaka is what they say. So it's about that place, and he has some really interesting story, a mythological story associated with it as well. So he will narrate it at later stage. As Sunana introduced him, he has worked for Indian Express, Outlook, and now he's the editor at The Wire. And this is, he has lived in the Red Corridor area for weeks, no, to report that things. Actually, he has lived with the Naxalites themselves. And this is about the Maoist insurgency. And he has also taught at Ashoka and Ashoka University and Jindal Global University. At both places he has taught that. So he has worked as a professor there. And he was a writer in residence at Kafka House, Prague. And also he has got fellowship. It's called the Krishna Baladev Vait Fellowship for Innovative Fiction. And also he was a fellow at Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. His work. What's very interesting about Ashutosh's personality is like, if you ask me to, almost of you have an idea, basic idea of a Venn diagram, right? So the criticism, journalism, and fiction writing, generally they don't means intersect each other, okay? Here is a very special case. He has exceeded in all the trees. So all the three circles becomes one circle in his case. So that kind of, he has written short story writings as well. And he has got this journalism things also. And as well as he has got a criticism, which is acclaimed as one of the best criticism book on Hindi fiction and cinema. So let us move on to him and let us get on to some of the questions. The first and foremost is his education is in economics, MA economics he has done from Mumbai. Yeah, so it's education in economics. So Ashutosh, what made you from the economics into the journalism? Was it planned or it just happened? So how was it?
Well, such a long introduction, it has left me terribly embarrassed to begin with. Now, coming to your question, my journey from economics to journalism, it wasn't planned. Just like my entry into these degrees of economics, it wasn't planned either. In your college and university days, you go on acquiring degrees, so did I. Why did I enter journalism? Because since my early days, the only vocation I knew about I could handle with some amount of efficiency was writing. So soon I realized maybe journalism alone can give me any semblance of a career, because writing fiction or even literary criticism wouldn't have made me a living. So yeah, so I entered journalism as a mere career back then. Yeah,
So you mean to say it's just an accidental, it happened. So you
it
were,
just happened. I did not have any degree in journalism.
yeah, it's more of a passion towards the writing.
Yeah, this is the only form of writing which I back then thought could also earn me my bread, earn me my rent of my home. That's it.
That's true. In this specific book, right, when you have written this particular book, we can very clearly see three divisions. One is the police, and one is the tribals community which we have, and of course we have the Maoist thing. And also, we have a very decent forest in between. It also has come as a character in your book. The forest also resembles like a character. So what kind of an association which you see here? So they are not independent. They're all related to each other in the whole story. So can you just brief about what is the situation of each of these entities?
See, in this book, which is based in the Red Corridor, which is a geographical area that runs from somewhere on the West Bengal border of Jharkhand, then Odisha, then Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Jharkhand, then Telangana to Abujmar. This is the belt of what we call the Naxal movement of the country. It is the oldest running insurgency in the country. When I say running means, this is a continuous insurgency for the last 60 years or so. So when I was parachuted by my newspaper, Indian Express back then, to cover on this insurgency, I hardly knew anything about it. All I knew was these were a bunch of guerrilla fighters who were fighting for what they call the Sampurna Kranti, protected revolution. When I went there, I soon realized that we can classify the various characters of this insurgency as if they were part of an epic drama. On one hand, you had Naxals, but even Naxals were not a homogeneous group. Naxals of Andhra Pradesh, that is Telangana, were as distant from the Naxals of Jharkhand and Bihar as perhaps people say of Mylapore and Triple K in Chennai could be as distant from somewhere people in Bangalore. So they were within the Naxals also, there were quite a degree of heterogeneity. So I tried to identify the various characters of this drama. One were Naxals, and then there were Adivasis who at several instances had joined the movement. But the Adivasis who had joined the movement in Bastar and Abujmar, they were remarkably different from the ideologues of Telangana, who continue to head the movement. So these intricacies of the movement appeal to me as a researcher, as a journalist, as a scholar, to understand more about it. This is one. Second bunch of characters for the security forces. Again, the security forces, they are not, again, not a homogeneous entity. Please understand, there are two primary kinds of forces who are fighting against the Naxals. One are the state government's forces, like for instance, Andhra Pradesh. You have Andhra cadre, police of Andhra cadre, who speak Telugu, who know their language, who know their culture, who are from Khammam, who are from Adilabad, who are from the districts of Andhra Pradesh. On the other hand, you have central paramilitary forces, people of BSF, people of CRPF, who are absolutely disconnected from the area they have been stationed in. Imagine somebody from Nagaland, Manipur, who has been deployed in Abujmar, deployed in Bastar, or deployed in Jharkhand. They have zero connection with the language and culture, and they are asked to enforce not just law and order, they are asked to conduct security operations. So what kind of absurd drama is that being played? So I wanted to decode that as well. This became the second character of the tragedy, of which I just named. Third was, as you rightly said, is the forest in itself. Now, what is that forest? Please understand, this belt that runs from Jharkhand to Gadchiroli in Maharashtra, that is perhaps the richest land of India. Underneath this land, you have some of India's richest iron ore deposits, coal deposits, and this is also India's poorest belt in terms of not only basic indicators, but also the reach of the administration and the government. So that makes the entire battle all the more complicated, because it's not like Kashmir. Kashmir is not a fight for natural resources. It is not that if Kashmir is cleared, somebody else will immediately jump in. But here we know in Bastar, for instance, or in Odisha, for instance, if Odisha is cleared, tomorrow you will have, immediately you will have mining companies jumping in to extract the profit of that area. So the forest itself is a character. The very presence of the natural resources underneath the land, where this drama, where this tragedy, where this revolutionary movement is being carried out, that makes it all the more tragic. So thus, I tried to, when I was writing about it, or when I was reporting through that area, I tried to distinguish among these various characters, and I realized forest, the geography itself is a character.
Yeah, it has come out so well there, actually. You can make out the forest itself as one particular character. See, in your explanation, you said that the security, of course, it's from the different places. They might have come from Manipur, they might have come from BSF, like that. It's because a government is making them to go and work there, right? But when it comes to the Maoist, right, they are also not all of them are local. There are so many people who are coming from outside, totally not related to that area, the Bastar area. What makes them to come to a remote place like that? What something goes behind these people? So why do they come there, actually, all the way from their place to this area?
Well, that's easier to explain in a way. That's about their ideology, and I think that several of you must be already aware of. When this movement began somewhere in the 1960s, this was the time when the Indian middle class, educated class back then, that had become increasingly disillusioned with the Nehruvian model, increasingly disillusioned with the path India had taken after independence. You can say India was just in its adolescence till by then, mid 1960s, but people were becoming restless. This freedom is not true freedom, and now it has become fashionable to term them anti-nationals and all. Let us not forget that there was a time when people like Satyajit Ray and and Mrinal Sen, they were making movies on that. So there was a degree of respectability. It was not all about violence. There was a degree of respectability to it, because it brought certain ideas, certain themes to the national discourse, which had then been completely ignored. Now, coming to your question, what made them come to these areas to work for it? It was sheer idealism. I had known of several countless people who left their posh homes, affluent families, who were gold medalists in great colleges, and yet they decided to choose a guerrilla life for what? For a dream that one day they could bring a change. Of course, you can say that dream was just a daydream. They couldn't have done it. Yes, Indian state is too mighty. Indian state cannot be fallen. India is too big a state. Democratic tradition is also very strong. But this is how idealism works.
So do you think like all these Maoists who have been there is mainly the ideology which they are bringing them to be there, or do you think there are any other circumstances which makes people to get involved in it?
By circumstances, if you mean that they are material circumstances, that disillusionment, that the current situation we are in, this can be changed only by an armed revolution, yes. But then the idea, what is the compelling thought? That's an ideology that we can bring a change only through an armed revolution. Now, good or bad, we can debate about it. I personally feel that in a democratic state, in a constitutional democracy, violence cannot be a legitimate means to bring a change. But yes, that's how they thought, they believed in for a long time, and many of them continue to believe in that.
Thanks for that. But this genre, which most of them rightly identified, is narrative non-fiction. So as far as literal concerns, it's considered narrative non-fiction. One thing is like, the entire book could have been a wonderful novel as well, or it could have been just a reportings, or it could have been analysis as well. But you have avoided all that forms, but you have almost like clubbed everything. So we can see you as a story writer in this, you can see as a journalist as well, we can see an analyst as well in the whole thing. So what was the idea when you thought what form you should write this book? Did you had anything, or just it made you to, while writing it came in this particular format?
Well, I'm not sure how many of you who are present here read this book. So when I entered this area, when I started reporting on the Adivasis, on the Maoist struggle, it was clear to me that while my bylines are appearing regularly in my newspaper, back then the Indian Express, I was clear that bylines are not sufficient to explain or to express what all I have been witnessing, I have been recording and taking notes of. So I knew kind of in the first month itself that there has to be a different narrative. What could be a narrative? Initially, I thought that, okay, let's write a novel about it. And I began as a novel. And you wouldn't believe that I wrote some 20,000 words or so. I even got several extracts published here and there. But then I realized it's too factual, too direct, to give it even remotely a semblance of a novel. It has to be written in the way it happened, and I must name the people who I cannot camouflage them. So I traced it all together. I started writing it. I said, I have very rich diary notes. Why can't I write about them? So the second draft was about my diary, my own travelogue. So a couple of years into the second draft, I realized this is becoming too personal. I am everywhere now. I cannot escape it. When I write it as a diary, as a travelogue, almost every other sentence will have I see, I observe, I am there, I witness. I have to remove myself from the narrative as well. How can it be all about me? But how do I write in the first person? And so the challenge was, so I soon realized this also has to be discarded, and then emerged this form in which I chose to give certain characters voice of their own. So, so what do I mean when I say that? So the first chapter begins with the confessionary note of a deceased man. Now there cannot be any non-fiction book in the conventional sense which has a dead person talking at all. It will immediately be put aside in the category of fiction. You cannot have a dead man talking. But that dead man has a name, which is a real person, and that dead man has once upon a time narrated a story to me. All I said, why don't I tell the story backwards? So I decided to narrate the story the way he recalled it to me in a different way altogether. This is how I narrated it. This is how this form came about, when I am employing multiple forms, multiple devices, which I back then felt that perhaps the best way to express the multi-dimensional reality or multi-dimensional truth of the Naxal land.
In fact, the name in Hindi, he has written this book both in Hindi as well as English, okay? The name of the book in Hindi is Mrityu Katha. So that means a dead man's story, okay? So we in Kannada, we called it as Sattavara Sollu, so means the dead man's story as well, exactly. So that's how he is. He's bilingual. He's able to write in both English as well as Hindi, both languages very fluently.
Now, I'll just intervene here because he has explained the word mrityu here. In Hindi, as in English, I have divided the book into several chapters. And these are recurring chapters. Like in English, you have chapters which are death, dream, delusion, displacement.
Mehuwa.
Mahua, that's in Hindi. Yeah. So in Hindi you have chapters called Mrityu, Mahua. So one chapter is Murmusha. Now Murmusha means death wish. So there are 3 or 4 chapters which have this, which are with the title called Murmusha, death wish. So what do I say in those chapters? I try to explain or try to comment or try to interject that there comes a point in a prolonged war when the residents, when the participants in that war, they are inflicted with the desire of self-annihilation. Unfortunately, that has entered the participants of this war. So it has become death wish now.
So death wish. So what do you mean by death wish? Like they will, before dying, they will have some kind of a wish they ask. Is that the
No,
death
no, no.
wish?
It's not that this is my last wish before I'm executed.
What do you mean by
is
death wish?
death wish means there's a desire to die. There's a desire to die. There is, when disillusionment reaches a point that annihilation becomes the only option available. Okay, let this be the last point.
So it's like Rudra Ramya. We use word called Rudra Ramya in Sanskrit.
Maybe,
Something
yeah.
which is so attractive that you don't mind dying.
You can say that.
Yeah,
And
Rudra
because
Ramaniya they call.
Rudra Ramaniya, yeah, you can say that. And let me quote Nietzsche here, if you are saying Rudra Ramaniya. Nietzsche has once very famously said that those who surrender, they are perhaps the strongest, because they know that after this, the surrender at the moment, they may have a bigger life elsewhere.
So, it's because you said about the surrendering, okay, so I'll come straight away to that. There are many Maoists, so they are surrendering to the government and they want to lead a normal life. Generally, what makes a Maoist to surrender back? Because it's such a passionate ideology with which they have gone there, right? So what are some, if you can give some example, what makes them to return back and surrender and lead a normal life? There are stories like that, many of them. So they would like to come back and lead a just basic life, but it becomes like an illusion at times, kind of a thing. So can you just give some example, what makes them to come back?
See, ideally, this story should be best narrated by the person who has surrendered. But let me only try to explain what do I mean when I explain this. Here is a person, maybe a man or a woman, who at the age of 18, having got a first-class degree from a top-notch engineering college, decided that the only way this I can lend any meaning to my life is to bring about a change in my society. And the only way I can find it is a protracted revolution. So I leave everything behind, my job, my career, my family, and I enter this bunch of guerrillas who live in the most barest possible means you can ever think of, with the sword of death always hanging over you. And this is how you live for the next 30 years in jungles, battling all kinds of diseases, malaria almost every month, hunger, lack of nutrition, threat of police attack. And after 30, 35 years, when you're reaching 50 or maybe 55, suddenly you realize your diabetes, your kidney, your liver and whatnot, it cannot survive much longer. Now many of them, they continue to live there, they die in the same situation, but some of them also disintegrate in between. And it is at this point they want to come out. But please note, and this is the tragic part of it, if a Naxal is surrendering before the police, they will not come out unharmed. The police will squeeze them to the best of their potential. They will extract all the possible details about their own friends, their own organization, and this person will be revealing over a month or 2 months or 3 months all the secrets of their own friends they had held so dear to their life for the previous 30 years. that makes it all the more, the entire process of surrendering makes all the more tragic. So this is yet another tragic chapter to the tragic epic I spoke earlier about.
Here, like, I have a curiosity, like when you say that they might end up in some of the diseases because of the worst conditions, the malaria and whatnot. Is there any statistics on the average lifespan of these Maoists?
Well, those who live in the jungle, they 40 is around something, 40, not more than that, 40, 45-ish.
That's scary. Yeah, that's very scary. And when we talk about this kind of a reporting, you will end up with a lot of risks, right? So many risks are there from all directions. It could be a villager, the Adivasi might be go against you, or it could be Maoist, or it could be security forces. What kind of a risks were there for you? What were you facing?
Well, all kinds of risks. The biggest was, or the least was, or the most initial was that you could be killed at any point of time. You could be caught in crossfire, or you know that Dandakaranya, it is laid with landmines. So, and landmines can be of two kinds. I have written in my book that one which are detonated by a detonator, and the other which explode by a mere pressure. And you never know where such landmine might be. So these are all kinds of risks that you undertake to narrate a story. And I was not alone. Many journalists like me do that.
So, what was your ideology behind it so that you wanted to do all these things staying there?
I had no ideology.
Something should be driving you. So I want to do this reporting because it's such a remote place. You're far away. You are a person who is always in the metros, and you're far away from the metros and in this jungle, and you don't know whether really these reports are making any impact in the outside world or not. But still, day and night, you have stayed there and did this reporting. So some kind of an ideology, some kind of willpower should be there for you to stay back there and do this reporting. Was there anything?
As I said in the beginning, uh, I was and I am driven by the idea that by writing alone, can I give any sense to my life. So I just wanted to write, and in order to write, I needed to see things first. So I wanted to see what was happening in my country without witnessing. I wanted to be a witness, not a participant. I wanted to be a witness. But such is the situation that, not all such situations, that you end up becoming a participant as well. So yeah, your question, very easy. Only by writing alone I could lend any sense, any meaning to my life.
So you were giving more importance for the experience which you gain while writing. You wanted to see the life, then your writing becomes much more powerful or much more rich kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
certain kinds of writings, of course.
Okay, yeah. And see, uh, being there and working day and night and having all these risks, it will surely will have some kind of a psychological impact on you. And also you say death was there at every step you go. So what was the psychological impact on the mental health side? Was there any impact on it? Did you go through any sufferings there? So how was it?
This question has been asked on many occasions that I always feel embarrassed. And I believe that why should one speak about one's own mental health issues? There must be, there might be, let it be. We all undergo some, life itself is, whose life is not without some kind of mental troubles? Yeah. So there was some. Yeah.
There were some, yeah. So there were some, but like it's like, see, now when we are talking about the red corridor, we are talking about their mental status of the other people's. Like that, there will be many who would like to know how it will be like reporting as a journalist there. So kind of a fears or any of those things was there, or it was okay. Anytime I can do that now also.
Like I have written in the book that before I landed in the red corridor, I had seen in my entire life just one dead body. That was of my grandfather. And in my first 4 or 5 months, I ended up writing obituaries, good detailed obits of I think some 100 people. And several of those, and with increasing amount of time, I was only writing about them, about their families, and soon I found I was writing about people who I knew earlier. When I was in my first few months, I wrote about people who had died, but I did not know. They were strangers. It was a search for me in my initial months. I was an investigative reporter. Somebody, 10 persons have been killed, 20 persons had been killed. So my task was to give these names some kind of a lifeline, kind of a biographical detail, so that I wanted to ensure myself that they do not die unnamed. That unfortunately, my newspaper was giving me all kind of space I wanted. So I tried to ensure that whatever deaths I could find, I have to record all those deaths. But those were in the first few months. Soon I came to a point that I was writing about people I had known. I would come to know, oh, this person also gone. This also gone. That made it all the more terrible. How to write about that? Just until yesterday, like I told you, the book begins with a very tragic love story. Here was a Naxal. Okay, let me explain in some detail. He was a very senior Naxal commander in the Naxal ranks, and he eloped, he ran away with a woman he loved who was an Adivasi. They both were in Bastar. Because his Naxal organization wouldn't have allowed him to marry a civilian, a teacher, government teacher. So therefore, he stole 10 lakh rupees 10 lakh from their coffers, and he ran away from Bastar. From Bastar, now the Bangalore story comes here. So from Bastar, they came to Hyderabad. They came to Bangalore to Mysuru. But soon they realized that the money, 10 lakh rupees, even if they had 1 CR perhaps, it was of no use for them because they were Adivasis. They hardly knew any language other than a bit of Gondi and a bit of Hindi. That's it. What would they do? Who never stepped outside of their Bastar area? So soon they realized that perhaps the only place for them is to live somewhere closer to Telangana-Bastar border where they can settle down. So they thus begin their return journey from Mysuru towards the Telangana border. I hope you understand the geography, right? They are now coming towards. Somehow, Bangalore police and then this Telangana police, they got suspicious that this couple is not a normal couple. They alerted their bosses, and they were nabbed, and they were brought to Chhattisgarh. What is the next story? They surrendered in Chhattisgarh, and the Chhattisgarh police, they deployed him on the Naxal front now. So this man begins a journey from Bastar to Hyderabad, Mysuru. Why? Because he wants to raise a family now with a woman he loved. And both of them, after a very tragic chain of events, they are now back in Bastar in the same jungle, now fighting on the other side. So this person was then killed in a very treacherous battle by his former comrades. Yeah. So such is the. So I had known this person for a much longer period. So when I came to hear about his death, this person shouldn't have died. He should have been, Indian Constitution, Indian Republic should have been able to give him I wrote a very scathing article in my newspaper that Indian state must not have sent him back to Bastar. This person deserved a different kind of a life. In the name of rehabilitation policy, that's what I wrote. In the name of rehabilitation policy, you cannot send a surrendered Naxal, you cannot deploy him on the Naxal front, which the Indian state did then and has been doing continuously. Now let me give you just a factual kind of a interruption here. Some 90 to 95% of surrendered Naxals in Chhattisgarh, which is the capital of Naxalism for the last 40 years or so, they have been deployed on the Naxal front in absolute violation of all kinds of surrender and rehabilitation policy. Under the rehabilitation policy, they should be given a peaceful life. They should be taught things like gardening, electrician, mechanic, and so on and so forth. So they can start a new life. What do they do? They give them a new set of uniform, a new set of weapons, and send them back to the jungle. You have a question? Okay.
It's a security hierarchy.
Who deploys them? Okay. Okay. So they surrender before the security forces. Not central government, the state government. They surrendered before the state forces. Your local SP, local Thanedar, local Jila Kaptan, right? Or your DGP. They surrender before them. And the surrender and rehabilitation policy is very clear that under a surrender and rehabilitation policy, if you surrender, what is the purpose of surrender and rehabilitation? That I am a die-hard criminal, I want to surrender, I am abandoning my weapons, and please accept me and now ensure ways to rehabilitate me in the society. That is why I am coming out, right? This is the whole idea, philosophy behind the surrender and rehabilitation policy, which is prevailing in several states, not just in Chhattisgarh, not only in Karnataka, and not vis-a-vis Naxals only, but all kinds of insurgents. India, you know that this is not the only insurgency India is facing. You have Naga, you have Mizo, you have Kashmir. So any insurgent, as and when they want to come out, as and when they want to abandon their arms, they want to, quote unquote, join the mainstream, they expect a rehabilitation. It is the duty of the republic. It is the duty of the Indian state to give them the rehabilitation. But what does the state do? When you say which is the body? The Indian state. Article 12 of the Indian Constitution defines them as the Indian state. It is their duty. But what does it do? It sends them back. It deploys them back to the same battleground where they were deployed earlier. Just switch the side. Yeah. How cruel it is.
It's like, we have a...
I hope I have explained it, yeah.
It's like there's a big desert between China and the West, right? That's Taklamakan they call. So this Taklamakan meaning means, actually it's a tribal language. Taklamakan meaning means once you enter into it, you cannot come out of it. That's the meaning of it. It's in Taklamakan. So that's a big desert which we have between China and all this Central Asia. It's almost like that. It's like a Chakravyuha. You can enter inside, but it's not easy to come out of it.
Yes.
It's not easy to come out of it.
That's how I have described it in my book. And it assumes its labyrinthine form because of the apathy of the Indian state. It couldn't have been otherwise. Like this person, Korsa Joga, this person I just narrated a story about, he should have been killed. Yeah. He left the party. He left the band organization on his own. Why? Because he was in love with a woman, because he wanted to raise a family. And what does the Indian Republic do? The Indian Republic, okay, come in. The Indian government forces him to surrender and then sends him back.
Yeah. So there are a couple of chapters where this Korsa Joga tells his own story. So that you should read it in the book. It's a pretty heartwarming story, actually, how he tried to escape from it, but he could not. Yeah. In this, actually, see, we sitting in the metros and we sitting in the safe places, we read these news daily in the newspapers, and the media keeps reporting about the Red Corridor news. But it's kind of a they make it romanticized stories, or they make it as a crime stories. What kind of a insensitivity media shows while reporting such news? What have you observed? Because you have spoken a lot about the insensitivity of media, how things have been reported. And very interestingly, you mentioned one point saying that we need to understand their culture and their lingo before talking about them. But we talk their stories in our own language and in our own culture, right? Can you just explain more on the insensitivity which takes place while reporting such issues?
Yeah, that was among the first issues that I had faced when I found myself in the forested zone. I came from Delhi, and soon I realized that all the tools and devices I have, be it linguistic, cultural, intellectual, ethical, they need a complete overhaul, a total refurbishing before I even attempt to start telling their story. Because a lot of perceptions, conceptions that I have about things, about life, as simple as fact about geographies, need to be thought about differently. Let me give you an example, which I have mentioned there in the book as well. In English media, quite often we write about a distant village. But this whole, it's distant from me. It's distant from an Indian Express reporter, not for them. Merely because it's 5 or 6 kilometers away from the main road, and merely because you cannot take your four-wheeler, you have to take your bicycle or two-wheeler, doesn't make it distant. The more you write about it, you will instill it, inject it in the psychology of New Delhi, of Bangalore and Chennai, that this village is distant. Now, and you never realize what damage we inflict to that community by repeatedly calling them distant, distant, distant. So this is just one of the instances. And there were numerous such instances. Second, I realized when I went to Abujamar, for instance, that you cannot enumerate, you cannot evaluate their lives by the idea of their contribution to the GDP. How much is their contribution to the per capita income? This might be a legitimate tool to analyze somebody who's living in Bombay or Bangalore, but perhaps not somebody who's living in Kanker or Gadchiroli or Kalahandi. There has to be different parameters to evaluate that. So this was the constant churning in me, which began soon after I arrived in that area. And unless you address these questions, this gap, this which is not just a geographical gap, this huge ethical gap, this huge gap of philosophy, of ideology between you and the persons you're writing about, unless you try to address that gap, your writing will always be incomplete, will always be insufficient.
Maybe I can ask one more question, leave over the GDP side, but you have an idea what is the kind of expenses we are making on the security side on an annual basis? Do you have any numbers on that? It should be very huge, isn't it?
Okay. So I have done enough on this. Well, mostly it should be right, but please don't quote me. I'm quoting from a memory. So off the record this is. I can give complete answer maybe a minute later after this is over, looking at my notes. But if I recall correct, a 100-member company of CRPF, companies has 100 members. I think its daily expenditure is around 9 lakh rupees if it is deployed in an area. That's what I remember. So you can imagine 100 is for a company. Battalion has 1,000 troops, and right now CRPF has 62 battalions in Chhattisgarh alone. And to give you a perspective, CRPF entered for the first time in Chhattisgarh in 2003. From 3 to now, 20 years later, you have 62 battalions, and amount I just gave you. You can multiply. This is it. And over and above, you have BSF, over and above, you have ITBP, and you have state's own police forces. These are only central paramilitary forces. There are two kinds of forces I told you, the state force and central paramilitary force.
Ashutosh, to get an idea, what is the time period when you were there actually? What is the time period where all these incidents which has happened and which were you reporting?
I landed first in 2011 August. I stayed at a stretch of full 4 years, up to September 2015, and after that I have been making regular visits on and off. But those were the 4 periods when I was fully stationed in that area. That was the beginning of my journalistic life as well.
Okay. Let us come to something on the milder side. Let us go to the Ramayana. So, see, there's a Dandakaranya comes in which Vanakhanda or Aranyakhanda. So, when they come to the forest, so all that journey is called as Aranyakhanda. So, Sita talks a lot about this Dandakaranya, it seems. Let us hear from him. What is that? What was her idea about the Dandakaranya?
I had read the Valmiki Ramayana and bits. Oh, sorry. I had read the Valmiki Ramayana in bits and pieces. So when I was reporting from the Dandakaranya, this episode suddenly came to my mind. So the episode is, I'm sure that many of you might be familiar with it. So when Ram, Lakshman and Sita, they are on their way to the forest and Dandakaranya, some sages who are in that area, they ask Rama to kill the demons who are present in the forest. Sita tells Ram that please be very careful when you are using force, using arms. You have to ensure that you do not kill even a single innocent in the name of slaying demons. To use the modern language, let me paraphrase, there shouldn't be any collateral damage. Sita says, and then Sita, incidentally, Sita goes on to narrate the story to her husband. Okay, let me tell you, there are 3 kinds of vices. One is who is lustful, you are of course not. Greedy, you are of course not. Another is addiction to weapon. And my dear husband, please be very careful. And what is the story she tells him? She says that once upon a time, there was a great sage, great learned man who was living quite a peaceful and hermetic life somewhere. And Indra, in order to disturb his life, he camouflaged himself in the form of a warrior, and he came and he gave him a weapon, a sword. Okay, please keep it with you. I'll collect it from you after some time. So the mere presence of that sword made that sage corrupt. He became gradually, he started, for the first few days, the sword remained in the corner as it is. Soon he started stealing glances to it. Soon there was some kind of fascination in his, okay, what kind of thing is it? Soon he started playing with it. So this is how Sita warns him that you may have an addiction to weapons. So yeah, I have mentioned in my book that long before Sita perhaps, I had given it a literary allusion, long before Sita perhaps had forewarned or written the Janam Kundli or the horoscope of Dandakaranya, what kind of battle Dandakaranya might have to face in the modern era.
That the fact she says that just staying near to a weapon can make you a bad person. It's pretty interesting.
Can corrupt your mind.
Yeah.
So please be very careful. It can make you addicted to weapons.
Mm-hmm. There are many people who write software for the weapons actually. So they are in the area of all those things. I don't know how to take that kind of
By the way, this book has a chapter on AK-47. If you ever get a time, and if you do not get a time, please do read that chapter. That apparently is very close to my heart. This just a chapter about this great Okay, forgive me because I love this rifle. It's a fantastic rifle. Those who know their weapons, I know fortunately my weapons.
You
So
started liking
yeah,
the weapons.
it's a great weapon. I don't think that so far in the last 2,000 years to 3,000 years of human history, no mankind has ever produced such a weapon. This sole weapon alone is perhaps responsible for the killings of more human beings than of many other put together. And coming back to it, this weapon was created by, the rifle was created by a man called Kalashnikov. Why? Because he wanted to write poetry. He was a failed poet. And then he decided, okay, let's do something else.
So
It's a
failed
true
poet is
story.
dangerous.
Mr. Kalashnikov only wanted to write poetry at some instance in his life. Kalashnikov is his name. Only wanted to write poetry, this young boy. And because those were the Russian era, the Stalinist era, so he was far removed from Stalin. And when he was into when he came into designing rifles, even then it wasn't in his mind. All he wanted to do just to leave his mark. I couldn't leave my mark as a poet. What do I do? How can I die unsung? Okay, let me do something else. Let me at least try my hand at a rifle. This is how he ended up designing, I'm sorry to say, such a fabulous weapon, such an easy weapon, which you can find from Afghanistan to Kashmir to our security forces, to Congo, to Somalia, and where not. So it's a story of this weapon.
Yeah, just we'll move a little bit of this red corridor to something else actually. So you write fluently both in Hindi and English, right? What do you see these two areas? What are the challenges of each? Is it very different, or is something like, when do you choose English? When do you choose Hindi? So those, because it's very rare someone writes in two languages in India. So not seen so much. It's nice to see someone is fluent in both and writing books in both languages.
Well, unfortunately, it has become rare only now. It wasn't until 2 decades before, maybe a decade before. In our own city, you had somebody like Mr. Ananthamurthy, who was a professor of English literature, and he wrote in Kannada.
No, the
And there were
people
many,
used to
many
write
others.
in Kannada, but they never used to attempt to write in English, actually. Their first tongue, mother tongue, was what was important. Anandpurti used to discourage any one of us when we go and say that, can I write it in English? They said, no, you have to write it Kannada only. So he was very passionate about Kannada. I'm saying, like, you have two languages. Like, what is it actually? How is it? You look at it. When do you choose one language? When do you choose the other language?
Like my illustrious predecessors of my own country, many others before me who worked in two languages simultaneously, I believe that I am wired into two languages. When I named him, I only wanted to highlight I am not a unique case. There are many before me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there are.
many before me who worked in two languages. Tagore also worked in two languages. So I'm
Girish
coming to
Karnad was also
why
there.
do I do so? It is not that I intentionally do so. It happens all the time that I realize that some expressions or some themes might be better suited to a language. Like I give you an instance that perhaps may aptly sum it, because you are pressing for an instance. The area I come from, North India, in your primary schools, you are often given an essay to write a short essay on themes like Deepavali, right? Your favorite cricketer or your favorite film star, right? There may be an essay on, say, for instance, the cow, right? So when you write on the cow in Hindi, let me tell you, the first sentence invariably be, गाय हमारी माता है. You will not find any contradiction in it. In the most convent schools, it will be a natural sentence. गाय हमारी माता है, गाय ये करती है, गाय वो करती है. You can understand, some of you, right, Hindi. When the same person will come to English, in the same school, same class, the cow is a domestic animal. You can never write cow is my the cow is my mother. You just cannot. There is by no stretch of literary, mythical, epistemological imagination you can write the cow is my mother in English, let me tell you. Similarly, by no stretch of epistemological imagination, you can write गाय एक पालतू पशु है in Hindi, at least in the area I belong to. That will be absurd. गाय एक पालतू पशु है? What does it mean? गाय एक गाय है. गाय, you may not write गाय माता है, which is understandable. But गाय पालतू पशु है. By this, let me tell you, I am not at all a Gorakshak. I mean,
More disclaimers here.
I mean, I need to very politely, if at all I have no dietary restriction, I may have, but I respect whatever food, your habits you may or may not have. I have not at all no into that. But I am very politely trying to underline that गाय एक पालतू पशु है may still not be in the most poshest schools of Delhi or many parts in North India. This may not be a feasible expression. Something is lacking here. So, yeah, coming to your question, why do we switch to languages? Just to express ourselves. Now, this also explains the question that I addressed initially. The gap between a writer and the area he or she is writing about. The greater the cultural gap, the greater will be the possibility of distortion. Yeah. So, this is why I choose to. And yes, because I write in two languages, there is always this constant tussle in me on how to make my both the languages amenable enough, malleable enough to represent both the sides of the reality.
That's interesting. So I think before we move on for the Q&A, would you like to present anything? So would you like to talk about it? So you have some images.
I'll do it during the Q&A itself.
Q&A session itself. Okay.
We are here up to
8. 8-ish.
So I hope there might be a question during the Q&A so that I can take that off.
During that time, you would like to take?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's one more thing is after all this reporting and after this book and all, was there any change in your personality which you observed yourself? Because it's a life-turning experience, did you see yourself any change in your personality when you are back now what you are and what you were before?
Well, I should only talk about physical changes. I lost 2 teeth. My bike, I was crossing a river in a Bhujmal. So, and there were several physical ailments. Otherwise, mental issues, let's push them aside.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, you would have become more courageous sometimes, or you might have become more humble. So these are all, it's not just mental alone. It could be so many other characters and personalities which will change, right? So when we go through a strong emotional period, after it's out of it, that will be change in the personalities, what I have observed. No? No, it's okay. You can leave that. No issue.
I would say perhaps it's too early for me to evaluate myself.
Okay.
Let me grow a little bit more older to say how I changed.
Yeah. And your other book, which is highly acclaimed in Hindi literary word, it's called as Pitruvadha. So this Pitruvadha is so many times it was used by D.R. Nagaraj, our own D.R. Nagaraj. It's like all our writing has to be Pitruvadha. Unless you kill your father, you cannot establish anything new. That's the idea. So Pitruvadha he used to call. So what made you, this book has come out quite early actually. So you have written not much on the fiction side also. So suddenly you have gone to the criticism and you have made this book, and I heard very good stories about this book. So can you just tell about this book?
So, but before that, D.R. Nagaraj used the word Pitruvadha.
Pitruvadha is very
wonderful.
common.
I don't know
it is
about
very.
that.
We all talk
Good.
like we have to write like a Pitruvadha. Unless we kill our father, we cannot create anything new. That's.
So I'll briefly tell about this book. It's a book of literary criticism. It's mostly on the novels, not only Hindi novels, but the novels of other languages as well. I wanted to write a novel. I still want to write a novel. What do I do? I want to write a novel. So I realized, having failed in writing a novel, I realized, okay, let's start writing about a novel. If you can't write a novel, okay, let's start writing about a novel. So in the process of writing about a novel, I thought, let's understand what the form is. I should know what the form I want to write, and I have not been able to write. So this book came out of my journey or my attempts to understand the form of the novel, which actually is literary criticism. But for me, back then, even now, it's not literary criticism. It's my attempt to understand the genre the novel is, and why I was doing it only for myself, because I wanted to do it. Attempted it one day for myself.
No, I really would like you here, Ashutosh, because though you found it difficult to write a novel, you didn't go to design a weapon there. So you wrote a criticism essay.
By the
So,
way,
so we are all very happy about it.
I have not yet lost hopes. I am still into the novel. I have not yet lost hopes. I do hope to be here next time with the novel
So,
along the side.
what are your future plans? Like, what do you want to write?
The novel.
You are writing
Let
novel.
me put it
Okay,
this way.
yeah. So we wait for that. Okay. To conclude, like, would you like to read something from your book?
I have a small chapter that I want to show you, but this I will do. I hope that there might be a question.
Yeah, we'll give more time for the question answer session only. And also, like, there's one thing as an announcement we would like to make is we were planning to have both the Hindi version and as well as the English version books here, actually. The distributor has failed to send, so he says tomorrow morning he will give it to us, okay? Tomorrow we have an event even at Atagalata. So any of one of you are interested in the book, so it will be available at Atagalata, okay? So, and also, of course, it's available in all online shops like Amazon, Flipkart, and also you can buy there also. But otherwise, the hard copy. Here, it's only the Kannada version which is available, which we are planning to release on Sunday, okay? Right. Shall we open up for the Q&A? Yeah.
Thank you very much. It sounds like a very interesting book, and I intend to read it. I have two questions. One maybe slightly rhetorical. I've been reading both Nandini Sundar's book and Madhu Ramnath's book. And Nandini Sundar's is sort of more academic in nature. Madhu Ramnath's is more from a personal account. And yours seems more journalistic. So is there, one is, how do you differentiate your book from theirs, apart from it being journalistic in nature? And the second question is more in terms of when you start writing a book like this, do you also read what's written about the topic and the region and therefore sort of situate yourself? Or how do you, what is the process? Or do you just sort of write and then see how it goes?
I have reviewed both of these books that you have named. So I have reviewed them. So you can just, it's available online. So my perspective on this book, you are right, Nandini's book is more academic and his book is more personal. But in both the books, you don't have the Naxals. Right. And my book, at least I would like to say, it's not journalistic, it's novelistic, if I'm allowed to say. Yeah. I have tried to demolish, destroy, challenge, contest, all kinds of possible narratives. At least I have tried to. I don't know how far I have succeeded. At times it reads like a diary. At times it's the account of a person who have gone long away, long before, who are dead. So yeah, it's a novelistic account.
In fact, it's the best example to understand what all the way we can narrate a story, like first person, second person, third person. So all of them are there in this particular novel.
And then there are long essays as well. Somewhere I have inserted essays into the narrative. I realized, no, this is not sufficient. I need to now intervene as an essayist into the book. And I wrote essays as well.
You had a second question?
Can I? Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
For recording.
Sure. Oh, all right. So just to add to his question, I think a couple of years ago, Alpa Shah, an anthropologist, also did a foray.
Night March.
Night March, yes, which was like a big book when I was in college, but like it was like a big deal back then, and I think she went undercover and everything. So I'm not exactly sure, but my question was also very methodological in the sense that these are very similar ways of approaching this arena, this region. And I wanted to ask you, why did you go, first of all? I missed the first part of this of the session, so I wanted to know what led you to this, and the people before you who came, who you might have been intrigued by, and again, in the method of it, like journalism and anthropology, they seem very similar to me in my head in the approach of it, in the inquiry and everything. So I just want to know, like, your experience of it and when you were there, and did you think about what you were going to write? Did you think about, oh, this is what matters to me, and this is what I want to take forward, and this is something I really must communicate? The thought process of being in there, being in the field, how was it?
So Alpa, I have reviewed that book also, Night March. So I written about that, I mean. So Alpa's book is about her travels, I think some 20 or 21 days in Jharkhand from one part to the other, right? She traveled partly with the Maoists and partly with some others. This is the whole story all about in a narrow stretch of Jharkhand. Whereas this book is of my own experiences that is stretched for full 4 years. And over many times wider as well as longer territory. So that's only in Jharkhand. It's from, say, Jharkhand to Chhattisgarh, Telangana, and so forth. That's the difference. This is one. Alpa went there as a researcher, as an academic. I did not have any quote-unquote methodology other than that of primarily, I was a journalist for the newspaper named the Indian Express, but my inquiry more or less almost immediately became, if I may use the term, novelistic, which is I decided to suspend all kind of value judgments I may or may not have, and I decided to record it in the voice that they wanted to narrate it to me. So I did not have any research methodology as such, yeah. And I was not doing research as, yeah.
I just want to know what your motivations were.
My motivation, as I said in the beginning, I was sent there as a very young reporter. And like many reporters in their initial stages, I believed back then, and I still believe, that the only way I can lend any meaning to my life is through writing. So I was only trying to lend any meaning to my life, that's it. And I found myself there, so I wrote their lives.
Two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The first is fairly simple. What was the time lag between the first draft and the final, final publication that came through? That was the first. The second is, from my very limited experience of, that whole area, is that, you are working with a set of very different and often opposing forces. You've got the police, you've got the armed groups on one side, you've got the Naxals, you've got the people, the tribal people who are also there between. What was the kind of pulls and pressures that you had to face? Because you were obviously traveling with one lot. People knew that you were traveling with those people, that you were going to be, that you're writing about them, that you know a lot about them, that you can be an informer if you are, pressurized into it. So what is the kind of pulls and pressures that you had to go through while you were in this process for the 4 years that you were there?
Your first question, ma'am?
First question,
I know, I remember. That's the easier one.
Yeah.
I went there in August 2011. And my earliest diaries are around end August 2011, my field visits, and these are the earliest diaries that that have eventually found their entry in the book that appeared, the book, the death script, this one, in April 2020.
Right. But you said that you wrote 120,000 and then...
Yes, exactly. So all through these years, I tried to find a form in which to integrate, in which to assimilate or assemble the various inputs that I had been recording. So, okay. Now, do you want the answer about this book alone? This book I started writing in September 17. Before the 6 years, 2 or 3 drafts I worked upon, which I discarded. It began in September 17. This particular book. But I do not consider the time, these 6 years, as my way. They were the foundations. Without that. Now coming to your another question that's very important. With all honesty, I'll say, I never spared any police officer, any police department, be it CRPF or the other one, but state forces or the CRPF, but I only got the highest form of respect and affection from them. As a matter of fact, I am saying, I have said it on record on elsewhere as well. When I was posted there, nobody ever harassed me. It has been the case with many of my predecessors, even now. Journalists, researchers, they routinely get harassed. Somehow, I was never harassed. I was never stopped at any point of time. I was never frisked. My cameras were never checked. With the Maoist, yes, twice I was made captive. I have written the story. They didn't trust me. As our survival kit, journalists like me, we do carry our press cards, our printed reports with us, so that as and when we are waylaid, we present our credentials to them. Look, this is we are. But somehow the team I was with them, I was then with, somehow they didn't trust me enough. And they very politely said, I have to hold here. I was in a jungle somewhere in Bastar. So I was made captive. And then I requested them. Of course, they didn't harm me. Just that I was in their captivity. So I requested them, look, these are my credentials. You can show these to your bosses. They said, okay, fine. But you will have to wait till the time we get clearance from them. Eventually, the clearance arrived. But yes, till then, I was fairly at the knife's edge. What if? So those were the instances.
But there was trust from both sides.
Yeah, mostly. From the state side, always, never was I pressurized, whereas as a matter of fact, I am saying, I did the most strictest reporting possible enough back then, and even now I continue to speak. You have seen me speaking here as well. But the state never harassed me. The Indian state never.
Okay, I have, again, not to break the norm, I'll have 2 questions. Okay. Part of the first question, part of which you have answered, is that I wanted to know how did they accept you, the process of your getting accepted by the Maoists. If you could share something. The second question is, I wanted to, understand about their ideology, because it has, what the ideology which they had in the 70s, I guess it has shifted from whatever little one knows of. Okay. Other than, of course, opposing state operation on the Adivasis, etc. If you could share something more on their ideology.
To your first question, how do I get accepted? It's just by gaining trust. Say, when you enter their first cordon, their lowest level rank comrades, then you meet them. You befriend them again and again. It doesn't happen on a single day. You meet them this week, next week, go after a month. Then they allow you, okay, he's a credible journalist. He's not into propaganda. Then they take you to the next step, then third, then fourth. This is how you do. So such is the process that eventually I gained their trust so as to be able to spend 23 days at a stretch with them, which I think till date is the record of any non-affiliated person with them, Indian person. Nobody has been able to spend so much of time with them. Non-affiliated and non-invited. I was not invited. Like Arundhati Roy, for instance, she was an invitee. She was specifically invited about the top Naxal commanders to live and stay with them and to understand their ideology and write about them. That was not at all my case, and they knew that I will not be writing a glowing account, which I didn't. You read my account of those 23 days, I am furiously questioning them, debating with them, but they allowed me the space to question, to debate. Of course, it was under the shadow of the gun, but yes, I did debate with them. Now, to your second question, how the Naxal ideology has mutated over the last 5 decades in various forms. It's too theoretical a question to be addressed now, but just to say, long ago, in the 60s, they believed, genuinely believed, when Maoist was still in China, that they can also overthrow the Indian government. Indian government was quite weak then. In the 17 and 80s, they believed if not the entire country, at least several pockets they could capture. They eventually did in 2000 from several pockets from 2008, 9, 10, 12, when, if you remember, in 6, Manmohan Singh PM said the biggest security threat. And if you remember, there was a time when as many as 104 districts had their considerable presence, which is 25% of India's geography had their presence visible. There was a time where they could loot an entire thana. I have seen the videos, I have that video. They have looted an entire thana, set the thana on fire, and they have paraded the police officers with their arms tied behind their back. That is completely impossible now. That stage is long gone. Indian state has acquired way too mighty weapons now. Their weapons are falling short. Their surveillance machinery has collapsed. Indian state over the last 10 years has acquired brilliant surveillance machinery, far too modern, rich equipment. Now what is the status? It is only the fight to hold on to whatever land they can in a limited sphere. So this is a rough shift I can narrate to you here. It's forested land, as I said in the beginning. This is the tragedy. This is the tragedy of the Naxal movement, of this entire battle. That this battle is being fought on a very resource-rich land. So it is not. So the Indian state is not innocent here. This I always highlight. The Indian state does not merely want to eliminate some ultra groups who had taken up arms. There is a motive behind as well. What is the motive? Once the forest is cleared, so the mining companies will walk in. So whose land is this? This is uncharted forested land. Some people may have the patta, you know, the Adivasis patta, the land rights. Some may not have land rights, but who cares? It's a forested land. It's an uncharted territory. But it's resource-rich land.
What is the life like for the daily life in this red corridor?
Okay, my life. Okay, when I lived with them, we say woke up around 5ish. We means I was say in a group of 10, 12 gorillas. We wake up around say 8 or 10, 5 or 6ish. There are no camps. When I say camps, as such, there are no tents over our head, which means we are always in the open, under the woods, wherever we find our place. We only have a small tarpaulin. I carried my own mosquito net. I was fortunate enough because I was coming from the city. And then we get up, we quickly do a roll call. They quickly do a roll call. Then we'll find a close by river. Then we'll get water, then some morning cooking. Then immediately there is a march towards some other area. They are always changing their camps, their night stays. If not daily, almost second or the third day. Why? Because they cannot have a permanent stay there. In between, they cross through certain villages. They stop by. They take classes of the villagers. They teach them the values of Marxism, of communism, of revolution, how revolution is necessary. They teach them how the Indian constitution is fraud. They teach them how the administration, how the people who are in capital cities, the capitalists, how they are after their land. They try to teach, quote unquote, these basic values in them. Then they march towards other villages, then same kinds of classes. In between, they hold their drills like combat exercises, weapon presentation, how to handle landmines, how to handle different weapons. And then they reach a spot which is going to be the night halt for the night. That's it. And the entire day revolves around the impending threat of a police attack, say attack by the security forces, which means they are always alert. What if they are moving and they might be ambushed?
Ashutosh, thanks for the book, and it's a subject which is not so much in the limelight, so it's really nice to see some in-depth information coming out. My question is, you talked about being a witness and not a participant, and for the rest of us, we mostly are that, if at all we even want to look. Mostly we prefer not to look at all. Is there a solution that you can imagine, other than, for example, how LTTE or the Khalistan movement was quelled, by the sheer force of the state? And is there a role for citizens to play?
Let me address to the first part, which was not a question, but it's an important point. Why this issue has been neglected? For the simple reason, Adivasis are not yet a vote bank. They're not a political force. They're not an academic force. I have written elsewhere as well, in this book also, that take the case of Kashmir. It's a legitimate struggle, but let me try to just distinguish between these two struggles. Kashmiris are struggling for their land. Kashmiris are rich, they are prosperous. They occupy some of the topmost positions in the global academy, in media houses, Washington Post. They are writing first-hand accounts or the first-hand books about their repression, about the atrocities, and so on and so forth. Right? They are also researching about their own lives in Europe's and America's topmost universities. Contrast with the Adivasis of Jharkhand and Odisha and Bastar, nowhere, not even a journalist, no political force. So the first reason of neglect is that the land where this struggle is being played, this is being carried out, its inhabitants, unfortunately, they do not constitute a voice of themselves. Therefore, it has become all the more easier for us. Us means we people who are the privileged citizen of the state. Dalits, it was because of Ambedkar. I always say Dalits had become a force over a period of some 150 years of struggle, which was led by Phule and Ambedkar and many, many others in many parts of the country. There has never been any Adivasi political movement who could bring the Adivasis together. So they remain a very disparate lot. What we can do as citizens, the least we can do is just to understand them, write about them, read about them, and give their struggle the legitimacy, the space that it deserves. Just to give a current instance, in Chhattisgarh, at this very moment when I and you are sitting here, Hasdeya Oran forest that is being uprooted for what? For Adani's coal mines. And because it is inhabited by a bunch of Adivasis, it largely remains unreported, except by a few persons who are based in and out of Chhattisgarh. Not many are talking about it. And Hasdev has India's some of richest coal reserves. This is what I said. The tragedy of this struggle is that the geography is resource rich. It's not taking place at a barren land. Indian state is culpable here.
How is access to the internet, the demonetization, changed the ecosystem when it comes to the Naxals?
Well, the area I mostly talked about here has no internet, no electricity. So this whole idea of demonetization and all that, it doesn't make any difference at all. Avujmad has nothing at all. Yeah, large parts of it. There has been some penetration, of course, compared to the previous eras, but large parts have no internet, no electricity at all. But yes, it is going in. But it will still take many years to see the kind of penetration so as to talk about UPI payments and all.
Thank you so much. Again, two questions. You put death and despair really prominently in the title of the book, and I wanted to ask you, were you prompted to do that in some way, or was it something of your own personal experience? That's my first question. The second one is, these people who you lived with and who you kind of interacted with and gained all this knowledge from, are they like educated, or like are they people from the city who have come in and trying to do something, or are they local people who have transformed themselves? I'm trying to get an understanding of those kind of people who you walked around and had this interaction with. What kind of people they are?
By people, may I presume you mean Naxal guerrillas, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, they are quite a heterogeneous bunch of people. A majority of them are Adivasis at this moment, not earlier. In the 1960s, it wasn't the case, 70s also. But over the last 15 or 20 years or so, the majority of the foot soldiers are Adivasis, who are mostly illiterate or have education up to, say, 5th, class 8th, class 10th at the most, certainly not beyond that. But they are led by mostly city-bred, fairly educated commandos who have taken good quality education in some of India's best institutions, and they decided to work for this cause. So this is the rough division of their ranks, you can say. And one more important thing I want to highlight, the most important part is they have nearly 40 to 50, 45% participation of women in their ranks. This is so unusual, so distinctive. I have written in my book, because I have covered Kashmir insurgency also. Kashmir insurgency, militancy, it's not insurgency, has not produced, has not had a single woman soldier, commander, or even a participant. At the most, women have pelted stones, at the most on the streets. They are not at all in the ranks. Whereas in the Naxal movement, right since the beginning, women have been the backbone. Women proudly say, they also say, they are the backbone of this movement. And let me add a very significant insight here. Any movements, be it a guerrilla movement or a people movement or Gandhian movement, whatever movement, a movement's character is determined, denoted by its composition. So if a movement has completely set aside or finds that no, it cannot have women, there is another movement that said no, we have to have, you will be surprised that since in the 70s or 80s, Naxals were clear, we cannot work without women, we have to have them. So they have consistently worked on it, and that's why, that explains the very high, inordinately high number of, in fact more, sometimes there are 7 women in a camp compared to 3 men.
The safety
and they all are, by the way, weapon carrying. Senior level, there are, yes. Yeah, now, that's another, I wouldn't say that patriarchy has been removed completely, but senior level, let me add this here. Senior level commanders or senior level Politburo or general secretaries, they are mostly the city-bred guerrillas. Sorry? They are mostly men. Why? Because there are fewer women. There were fewer earlier as well, even now. There were fewer city women who joined the movement back then. Yeah, that is also okay. There were, but comparatively fewer.
So, can we assume that a woman in this red corridor area is safer than the metros?
That's what they say. Yeah, they say it. Women in the movement, they say it, we feel far safer. In fact, there was a time when I was living with them, and there were 2 women and 7 or 8 men, all weapon holding. I was the only one without a weapon. So these were among my initial days with them. I have written it in the book as well. So I was a bit skeptical. How would it work? 8 men, 2 women. And there was no banter, no loose talk. So I asked one of the cadres, okay, not at all. We feel absolutely safe here. There is no threat at all to us.
It's very interesting. Any other question?
So yeah, there are, well, by the way, the despair is not in this. I wrote dreams and delusions, but despair you can also use. These are the various emotions that are described in the book. These are the themes or titles of the chapter which appear in the book recurringly. Death, death script, dream, delusion, displacement. These are the certain thematic allusions, yeah.
Yeah, just to conclude,
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today.
so we'll conclude with a nice information about Ashutosh. I think we didn't cover it. Ashutosh is the one who has received Ramnath Goenka Award for the 4 consecutive years, which is a record. And we know he well deserves it. The kind of reporting and journaling which he has done, he definitely deserves it. Yeah. Thanks, Ashutosh, for sharing this information. No, it's over. Time is over.
I'd like to thank Ashutosh Bhardwaj and Vasudendra for bringing today's session to BIC. Thank you to the audience for spending your evening with us.